Hello and welcome back to the Rainbow International podcast channel and my chat with company director Linda Stewart. We'd already discussed our journey from leaving high school, becoming an assistant, a stylist and growing up in a well-known Scottish brand at that time, but coming to a natural end in her progression in that business and knowing that there was something else out there for her and her brief introduction to Rainbow International. So we're going to talk to her now about her joining the brand, becoming the director that she became within the brand, and then where she sees it moving forward from now. So enjoy. Okay, Linda, so we discussed sort of leaving high school, coming through the ranks in your original job and getting to a natural conclusion for all the reasons that you felt that, and the viewers can watch that in the first part of your podcast. So you'd already been to Alan's salon and saw it in its sort of opening, and then had still stayed in your career for a couple of years more. So you've then naturally progressed into, right, it's something else for me to do now. So what was the start of that journey?
Initially, it was just building up a clientele, and we did stay behind to do classes. We stayed behind to do art nights. Alan brought up a coach, on sort of public speaking and stuff. So even though we were maybe not doing the shows as yet, we were practicing.
Yeah, you were getting ready for it.
We were getting ready for it.
So even at that point, you were doing that kind of thing where you were getting public speakers in, and you were getting taught. He'd seen that. Where did he get that idea from? Where did he see it, or it was just something that he thought that'd be a good idea?
I think he thought, oh well, if we're going to be on stage, we're going to be there to entertain. It's not just teaching hairdressing, and we'll need skills, different skills, and got this professor guy in, and every week we all had to get up and do a speech or give a chat about something. So
and this is what, 81? Something like 81, 82?
82, probably, 83.
I mean, it's miles ahead of anything, and to think that, it was copied later on by people, but the idea of having that kind of thing then's kind of mind-blowing. And again, he didn't tell me that. There's all, again, this is the great thing about you being here, is he's basically Alan's fact checker. Something like that, right? Tick.
But we were also just working on photographic work all the time. We produced a lot of work.
Yeah. And did you get involved in that pretty much from the
one.
off? Yeah. And obviously that's then a culture shock from what you'd said you'd come through, knowing fine well that you were trying to do it, finally got the chance to do it, had it pinched off you and the date wrong, and then you finally get to do that there. Was that a real sense of release and relief that you were finally getting that creative side out?
Yeah,
out?
I mean, it was just exciting days. You just, that's what you did. You worked in your clientele during the day, and then almost every night you were working on something, or we all socialised together. You were always talking about creative ideas or.
And were you teaching as well? And were you carrying on that thing that you were doing from before? Were you already starting to help out with the assistants there?
Yeah, everybody took part in the training, So.
That's a bugbear of mine when it comes to sort of the future of hairdressing, but the beauty of everybody having to be part of the education side of it is just the glory days as far as I was concerned for that kind of thing.
What you found is a lot of the assistants in these days just, they stayed behind with everything we were doing at night, they just wanted to be part of it.
Yeah.
So there was a whole culture, but it was a whole salon, everybody was part of this. As I say, it was almost like a Camelot type environment where everybody's working together as one on art stuff.
And that, moving forward, did that always seem like the way to do it? And that, whether you were an assistant, whether you were a stylist, or whether you were sort of had been in the brand for the 3 or 4 years it had been around, did it feel like you were always welcome to do that?
Yeah.
Right. So again,
just
that's
part of the culture. Yeah.
And that culture's opposite from kind of what you grew up, which must have been exciting. So within that timeline, when did you the sort of shift to the idea of I'd actually again, your dad's words ringing in the back of your head of having your own salon. When did that start to creep in there?
Alan sort of put it out there, because there was a lot of guys that were older than me, big, huge clienteles, art directors in the salon that maybe previously worked at, but come, which is good. It's a bit like all our directors that we've got. Can you imagine that you've got the same synergy at the time? But some rise to the top and some rise to the bottom, if you like. But Alan put it out there that if anybody, eventually wanted their own salon, to knock on the door.
And you were the first one to do it?
Aye.
Or knock the loudest?
Or knock the loudest.
Right.
But in these days, we were just, we're doing these shows, we're doing seminars, we're doing photographs. And I just got very involved in, Alan and I both could do choreography. We taught ourselves to do choreography. Alan and I could do makeup. I used to do like the press releases, so you used to get the photographs that were just, it was on film and you used to cut out the actual transparencies. And then I had a typewriter and I would type up. I would type up like a press release and send it to all the magazines. Right. So there was all these jobs that then I naturally just sort of took over. And also if we were organising a show, I would end up being the organiser and have the list and make sure somebody had the red bag.
Again, no surprise to anybody that's grown up in the brand that's watching, that's for sure.
So I think naturally, again, I just started to find myself in roles that I naturally just took on board. Yeah.
I mean, what came glaringly through Alan's podcasts was that it was just this natural growth and that situations arised. Well, we need to sort that situation out, or we need to fulfill that situation, and the thing just kind of naturally evolved rather than this initial grandioso big plan.
Oh, there wasn't a plan. What happened, I don't know if Alan said, it was 15 was Sturrock's where he started off. And the owners came to him and said, we're going to sell it, here's the opportunity. And of course, I think then because it started in Sturrock's, it was almost an ego, not saying an ego thing, but
it's an emotional tie as well, and it did have such a legacy in Glasgow hairdressing, didn't it? Because it's still, there's still clients that come to the brand to this day that still remember Sturrock's and know of it in that period. So it is a feather in the cap to end up going, well, I kind of grew up there and now, it's mine, as it were.
But we didn't see it as being a salon initially. It was going to be a school.
Right.
Well, it was going to be a school with a small salon. Right. But we were doing all these shows, seminars. We had people coming from Japan up to Buchanan Street to do classes. And then we thought, well, we could open up this international school. We could have all these international students. And then we could have a small salon upstairs just to take over.
So again, Alan was saying that during the kind of building of it, obviously making sure that the sections could get covered up, that there was stage lights, really, all the section lights were really mini stage lights, and there was a stage at the back, but then also there was the whole area to the left-hand side where there could be training as well. So it was obviously, it was quite a unique space for the fact that it was in sort of kind of historic bit of Glasgow, but then you were able to develop it like that. It was really kind of exciting as well. So you're obviously talking about the idea of it opening up as a small salon upstairs and then this training area downstairs. Did it kind of hit the ground running as well, or was it more difficult to get the salon going, or how did it pan out?
It wasn't difficult to get the salon going because we had a few stylists here and that was busy, but the school, that was more difficult because at that point, I think the exchange rate, had collapsed. Foreign students weren't even coming to London, the whole model had changed. So suddenly what we thought we were going to do wasn't going to happen. So we did have a lot of students coming from Scotland. We ran courses But then trying to find enough models, and you had all these hairdressers that maybe had a lack of skills that were wanting to whack people's hair off, and and at one point I thought, oh, this is just so dangerous because it's going to ruin our reputation, to the public, because we need so many models that are going out, with really wacky hairdos. Because in these days you didn't. Everybody wanted to use live models. Nobody did salad heads.
And again, that's interesting because it's probably not something initially everybody would think about. That even though it's not your stylist, it's not your hairdresser, it's not somebody you have trained from start to finish putting work out in the street.
Right,
somebody will still just say, "Oh, I got my hair cut in that place."
You're trying to say, right, come back in next week and
I'll fix it.
But there wasn't enough business either because, a 1 or 2 day course is fine, but you weren't getting hordes of people going on like a week's course. So it meant you were so underutilised in this building. You'd maybe 4 stylists upstairs working, which was busy enough, but we'd spent an absolute fortune on the redesign in the first place. Yeah. We were still spending all this money in photographs, we were doing all the shows, and eventually, you get the bank manager pulling you in. Did Alan tell you that story?
No.
No.
I know it historically, but
so, the Royal Bank, it used to be where Lush is now.
Yeah.
I mean, that huge building, and we had a meeting that this office was away downstairs in the basement, right? It was a wee tiny office. And the guy's name was Peter Sellers.
Right.
I remember that, and he was just wasn't funny.
No jokes here.
No joke. So, but because the last bank manager we'd had, he just retired. He was really jolly. He'd come in and go, how. Oh, nice floor, because that was our biggest outgoing, and he used to make these wee jokes about the amount of money we spent.
Wow. There is a history of that, and they seem to come like good cop, bad cop throughout your whole business career.
He'd never pulled us up. We
crack on.
We just cracked on, lived in an overdraft. And, this guy had said, this has got to stop now. And we were like, all right. And he said, I mean, in the next, I think it was like 3 or 4 weeks, if you don't bring in more than your outgoings, I'm not going to pay the staff's wages. So that was a real shocker.
Call,
yeah, I went home crying, thinking I'm going to lose my house and everything else. And, because there was a big bank loan on the property.
And how far into sort of 15's story would this be then?
Oh, maybe a couple of years. Right. We were just doing what we thought. If you just do all this artistic stuff, something will work.
Well, especially as you had it sort of set as a kind of two-part business within the business, and at the end of the day, one bit, for all intents and purposes, has been really successful, and you've got these clients coming in, and that's great. But then the bigger part of the building's not paying its way because the business model had changed.
So we were part of 365 then. So we phoned Leslie and we're like, oh, help! The bank manager's just phoned help. Yeah, so he sent somebody up who understood the figures a lot more than we understood. I mean, in these days, we did understand business, and as I said, we were doing the choreography, we were doing the makeup, we were doing press releases, but we were also doing, as a salon owner, you were doing like stock control. We used to do all the cashing up, Alan and I. We used to do all our figures manually. Count each cut. What you would take all the checks at the end of every day and actually physically count up how many cuts you did, how many colours were done to each person, and basically did all our spreadsheets manually. We did our own wages. We did that in a Kalamazoo. We used to get the money from the bank,
and had
with all the pennies and everything. And
had the 365 model kind of just the kind of rough idea of kind of their whole sort of profit and loss thing. Had they built that yet, or was it more just still a kind of community of
No, they had. But I suppose we hadn't really focused in, we were going through all the learnings and we were taking all the sort of lessons on board. But when you got right down to the actual numbers, this guy says, basically you need that amount of clients at that average bill.
Right.
Which meant we had to double our clientele.
Wow.
In 4 weeks, that was not going to happen. We
We're
understood
good.
that.
We're not that good. Yeah.
We're good, but not that good. Because the thing was, we were busy in the salon.
Yeah.
It's not like we'd a lack of clients, but we just hadn't built it as a salon model.
Right.
So what we decided was it wasn't the turnover we needed; it was the actual profit.
Yeah.
And we said, right, what we're good at right now is teaching. We're really good at training. And if we could, because the actual training courses we were doing, it wasn't so much demonstration. You were just getting people in. You were maybe doing a small demonstration in the morning, one model, but it was more hands-on that
right.
they were doing the cutting. And we had such a strong art team. And we were constantly practicing with the art team anyway, doing seminars, because we were doing like Salon International, Then it was possibly just the start of the alternative hair show and
right.
stuff.
Yeah.
So we thought if we can do Sunday seminars and fill the place up, then the money that we make will actually pay the shortfall.
Right, wow.
So there was a rep called Jerry Bain. Unfortunately, he's no longer with us. But we said to Jerry, Jerry, could you go out and sell these Sunday seminars? And he said, oh, aye. I can't remember how much it was, 20 quid. And we said, right, whatever percent, you take 10%, or 20%. It was enough of an incentive
to make it worth it. It's worth his while.
He comes in with like a big suitcase full of money, and he's like, how many could I have sold? And I said, well, how many have you done? He'd sold about 300.
Amazing.
So we had to do it over different weeks.
Did you think people were receptive to that because they weren't getting put on the line with actually having their scissors in their hand, and they were just getting to come and watch and absorb?
Yep.
Do you think that was a different thing?
Yep, and there wasn't, you really had to go to London, I suppose, to see shows and seminars.
And I guess the price point as well, if you were paying for a couple of days or a week's course, would have been, as relatively expensive as it would be now in comparison, whereas coming for this day in the salon where you're getting to sit and watch maybe wouldn't it be just quite so prohibitive and kind of scary. But that's amazing that you managed to sell that many at that time.
So I mean we did it for months and months, but we knew at that point that was wake up call. It was like we really have to know more about business, and if we've got a good business, it really gives you the freedom to do whatever you want. Yeah. Creatively. Yeah. So it's like you put the cart before the horse. I mean, we'd built up the reputation and we'd got the staff there because of all the artistic work and the effort that we were doing, but we realised then there had to be a bit more of a balance.
So obviously on the back of getting this idea of what's going to be a sound business footing to allow you to then move forward, how long did it take from scary meeting with the non-funny Peter Sellers in the basement to selling the shows and the seminars to then kind of levelling out? How long a period was that?
Probably took us about a year and a half to get to a stage where we turned it completely around.
Yeah.
I mean, we got out of our situation quite quickly.
Yeah.
And also we did go cap in hand to some of our suppliers and say, can we put off paying you what the backlog of payments and whatever we're buying from now on, we'll pay you up front and we'll chip away past payments. So we worked sort of hand in hand with our suppliers who work with us.
Well, it worked out pretty well for them because you've been using the same people for 45 years now. So
no, again, I know it wasn't them at the time. It was just before that.
Right.
But I can remember Oh, it was maybe like 2 years afterwards, getting invited back to the Royal Bank of Scotland. Peter had invited us for lunch, and we were upstairs in the boardroom, right? And they even had like the Royal Bank of Scotland chocolates had like the wee
logo
and stuff on it. And I said to Alan, "Oh, I wonder if there's some poor guy down in the basement."
I know what it's like to be down
I
there.
know, getting told that they're not paying the wages, you know.
And
we never took that lesson for granted.
I was going to say, it stays with you.
It stays with you.
It stays with you in the back of your head, going, I don't want to be there. I mean, you kind of. So, was there a shift in your own mindset then from being just kind of wanting to be this creative person and create all this artwork, and then kind of seeing yourself maybe change within the industry?
Yeah, I mean, at one point I said, do you know what, I don't want to be British Hairdresser of the Year. Well, there wasn't then. That hadn't started, but I didn't want to become the best hairdresser in the world. I wanted to become the best business person. Yeah,
and you could just see that was a massive kind of...
Even though, you know, for years we kept our hand in all the artistic stuff, but, you know, the focus changed then.
So from within that, so you've joined, you've built your clientele up, you've became a salon owner within this kind of brand. When did you feel that it was kind of as integral for you to grow the brand to where we are today alongside Alan? When did it change from just being about kind of 15 on its own to what became the bigger picture?
I think that happened organically as well. It's like most of what we've ever done is either because there's a problem and we've got to solve it, or it's been just a natural progression and step. When we made a shift onto let's try and understand business better, we became like fans of, you know, all the different business gurus that are out there, and we used to watch all the different videotapes at night, or you know, in the car you had cassettes on, you listened to Anthony Robbins or you know, somebody, so you were constantly opening your mind to different people's ideas.
Because was there, like, obviously that's a mentorship now, and again, you know, the internet's full of it for people to go and watch.
Oh, it's easy now. But
it's easy now, and obviously I've grown up in the culture, so it was spoon fed to us. But did hairdressing really have that kind of avenue, like a kind of Pied Piper, to have mentors like that out with what you guys had grown up with Leslie and 365? Was there much of that going on?
No, I mean, it was just, you know, through 365, really. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
They encouraged you to, they introduced us to a lot of these people. Yeah.
So at that point then, so you've kind of decided that, you know, you're going to be this, you're going to along focusing on business and obviously the creativity of the industry. And kind of Alan alluded to the fact that he then all of a sudden started finding that he was getting further away from the original message, because you guys were really going back, and the people that were teaching you hadn't actually been either through what you'd been through or had achieved what you'd achieved at that point. That kind of builds you up to the period of kind of getting back into apprentices and training in 15 again in the basement and all that kind of stuff around about that time.
Yeah, well, what happened, you know, when we made the swap from trying to make this like an international school, what came to light was, you know, we're spending all this time and effort training other people, but what about our own people? You know, they are getting training, but we should put more focus on the training. And I set out to write a whole training manual, because there wasn't one anywhere. Because again, we still didn't have an apprentice scheme at that point. Right. There was no NVQs or, you know, there was no regulation coming in to say this is what
you are a hairdresser.
Yeah, I mean the only people that got any qualification was through college.
Right.
So it was just on the cusp of they're starting to be, you know, like NVQs and different things. So I'd written this training program, and I typed it all up, and I drew all the pictures. And I mean, it was maybe, I don't know, it was hundreds and hundreds of pages. It took me a couple of years, I think. And it was all typed, and then it was photocopied.
I'm going to ask the really annoying question, does this thing still exist anywhere?
Do you know,
or?
I found it not that long, well, I'm not saying that not long ago, a few years ago, somebody had asked me, and I found parts of it, but don't ask me where it is now. I'll need to find it.
And I bet it still stands up today, though.
It probably does.
Yeah. I mean, I genuinely, obviously we've got our training now, but I'd still have my original, what I had to pass to become a stylist at Rainbow International at the time.
Right.
And I subsequently make my gang all have to do that in the training night, because as far as I'm concerned, that bit of paper saw me okay for all of my career, and nobody's ever really walked into the shop. I've not been able to give it a good go, you know. So quite frankly, if it's was good enough for me then, it's going to be good enough for my guys over and above what they're already learning as well. So that'd be fascinating to see. So initially then you've got Buchanan Street, you've got 15, and you're trying to sort of then start putting assistants in to train in 15 at that time, yeah?
Yep. What we did, you know, what we got from 365 was, you know, to do like your 5-year plan, your 10-year plan. And it was only then trying to set out such a plan, then we thought, right, we'll make this, you know, we're not just going to plan as one salon or 2 salons. Let's look at this totally differently. Let's plan as if we're a corporation, you know, and then work it back. And even if we're just got one salon, that doesn't matter. But we were trying to put everything in place, systems in place, you know, career plans in place. All of that was done way before. We almost did it and then grew into it.
Yeah. Wow.
Just through let's see what this looks like.
Yeah. So you've now got to the stage where kind of 15's running as a busy salon.
Yeah.
And for a lot of people that didn't know, it was kind of almost, or that's where Rainbow Room was, because the one weird thing with Buchanan Street in all these years is that, you know, folk, a lot of people don't know it's there because it was upstairs. And initially, and it's how I walked past one day, and the person I was going out with at the time said, you should get your haircut in there, and that was 88. So that was my first sort of avenue into doing it, whereas one of my uncles used to go to Sturrock's when he was a young man, and that's where he got his haircut. So it was 88. So going in at that point and seeing the place, I mean, it was just alive, you know, the hairdressing that was there, and you were going in as a customer. It was just like, this is the place to be, and this is where you want to be.
You never had enough seats around.
No, it was always bouncing, and you know, and it was interesting that I kind of realised that the guy that cut my hair at first was downstairs, and then, you know, within about 6-7 months, all of a sudden he was kind of upstairs with the cooler people. It was really kind of interesting, and then he wasn't in one day, and I get transferred to another guy, and instantly it wasn't as good. Now, it was as good, but that idea that I hadn't realised that, oh no, actually you can stick with this one particular person and they can look after you. So certainly, kind of the area that you're talking about now is, for me now, when I kind of recognise the brand first as a sort of customer, and then obviously coming to join. So in that period, kind of you would be talking to the person that was cutting your hair, and they're talking about going down to do this show in London called the Alternative Hair Show. And then obviously as I've grown up in the brand, at that period it just seemed to be this major milestone in the middle of the year. How important was it to do it, and then to be seen to be doing it with the peers that were doing the show at the time?
Yeah, because I'm sure we did like one of the very first ones, you know, because it was there really to raise money for leukemia, and we got right on board with it. you know, because Tony had lost his son, and it was for a good cause. So they did one in Glasgow, the very first one we ever did.
Right.
And then we get invited to do the London one. But along with, we used to do like the shows at Salon International. You know, so it was like you were down at the weekend anyway, so you may as well. For the Salon International one, you get paid, you get part of the gate money at the time.
Yeah.
In these days.
Good old days.
Good old days. But, we were poor as church mice then to do it. You know, obviously the salons were making money, but not enough to sort of fund 30 models going away down to London, you know. So we were on like the express bus from Buchanan Street.
Yeah.
Sometimes we didn't even have seats, you know, you're sitting on the floor. You're in some sort of dodgy hotel in Kensington. But it was all good fun, you know. We had all these models that did take part in Salon International, which was all more demonstration, and then it was a show that we decided if you're going to showcase, you know, your work, then the alternative, it is going to an international audience, and we still wanted to appeal to an international audience so that we could do sort of training, you know, because in the early days, Alan and I travelled an awful lot to Italy, Spain, Alaska, America. You know, we did all these hair shows, and we wanted to continue. Not us at that point. It was maybe not us personally that were going to do them. You know, we could have the art team go out and do it, but we wanted to keep that part of the business alive. So.
Of course, and obviously having grown up where you grew up, that didn't necessarily have a channel to let people fly. At the end of the day, there was no name above the door. So as long as somebody was producing the goods at the standard that it was meant to be at, then everybody was Rainbow International. It didn't have to be Alan and Linda. And again, did you get a satisfaction in actually being able to give people opportunities that hadn't necessarily been given to you back in the day?
I mean, that's what drives me. You know, it's anybody that gets some sort of recognition or any success. That's my driver. You know.
Yeah.
But with the alternative, I mean, it took part of it. I mean, it took 3 or 4 months out of my life because I was there at every single rehearsal with the choreographer. You see, I used to do all the drawings. We get the clothes all made up, and then you just had to keep practicing whatever hair you were doing.
And again, here's the running theme that comes through this, that there you were doing this alternative drawing at school back in the day, and for whatever reason, no really quite understanding why you were putting red flowers on your paint and everybody else didn't, to fast forward all these years later and you've got to come up with these creative looks and images that are going to stand out in comparison to all the other, you know, world talent that are going to be on that stage. I mean, was alternative more avant-garde to then the work that you produced at Salon, or so it was, did it have a theme through it, or was it almost like two different shows?
Sometimes it did, but almost it was like two totally different shows. Because you were producing a haircut or a look at Salon International, because hopefully then you would maybe get more cutting seminars, or some of it was perm, some of it was coloured, but the alternative just was there as a showcase for avant-garde work. But what used to happen is how Alan and I could work really good in tandem. You know, he would just be working away on techniques, right? And I would watch him working, you know. I wouldn't be doing the work, he'd be doing the work. And I would be getting frustrated because I'm like, what are you trying to do? You know, can you not tell me? And he'd be like, no, he just was working on feelings and techniques. And I would watch him for long enough that I'd think, I think I know how this can work. And then I would do a drawing and say, how about that? You know, and it would have to be his technique that worked to get that look. But I wouldn't be able to do a drawing and figure out what technique to use to get it.
Right.
So
Got you.
it
So
was
it's
just
a bit chicken and egg.
a bit chicken and egg, you know. So eventually it looked like I was a really clever one. I'd
Right,
be like,
right.
there you go.
Okay. Do that.
This
But the
the
thing
hair
was,
we're
it was the whole drawing though. I mean, it was the outfit,
Yeah,
it was the
hair.
clothes. I mean, got to the point where, Harlequin tights weren't a thing you could buy in the shop, and you were all painting them at 10 o'clock at night before you were getting on the bus and stuff like that. I mean, it was hands on. I mean, my first interaction was painting gel onto monofibre and wrapping it round poles in the shop to get the curls for you to chop them together to do the magic roundabout. So that was my initial entrance into it, and we're just all rock hard fingers from all this gel from all night. But it really was from the assistants that were just, and I was just in the door at that point. But it was that environment of, if you want to stay back, and you can get to do this stuff. And it was a magnet. It really was. So along with that, sort of the alternative being a continual theme through that period, we're kind of getting into the time of 24 opening, and obviously then David going on to be the director in that one, and kind of what for the rest of us seemed to be the natural progression of, by the way, there really is an opportunity here for you to move forward. Needless to say, nobody really imagined it being the salon that it turned out to be, and how amazing it was. But the idea that there was an opportunity for somebody that had grown up in the brand, and it was kind of really weird for me because David was my hairdresser. So to see the guy that was down the stairs and wasn't getting to cut beside you, to then being the guy that was getting to cut beside you, to then being the guy to take the directorship of that. Do you want to just, for kind of listeners and viewers, try to explain a wee bit about getting 24 opened?
Yeah. Well, in 15, our landlord had changed quite a few times when we were in it, but largely the landlord was our neighbour, and they kept asking, do we want to get out the lease early? They wanted to actually take back our building, and then in these days they could, once the lease was finished. The law has changed nowadays that you can't, but then there wasn't that protection for business owners. Once the lease is up, then you could easily get kicked out, which we did. That happened to us eventually. So we knew long term, 15, we might not be there. So when the opportunity came up to get 24, initially it was just like a safeguard in case we don't get our lease renewed. And David wanted to run a salon, so we're thinking, right, well, that's the opportunity, he can run it, and which was great because he made such a success of it. Then we had to then find another premises, which was George Square.
So, and the initial plan was always that the second floor was going to then be the academy. At that time, wasn't it?
Because we just ran out of space to teach. It was impossible. If you can remember, in 15, trying to do the classes, it was just crazy. Too busy as a salon as well. It was crazy. So we definitely needed. That was one of the driving forces of getting 24.
And again, with the design, with that, obviously Alan talks about himself and Dougie and the running theme of architects and builders getting the sack throughout the history of all of even happened when my shop was getting built, I think. But obviously continuing the same ethos as 15 had of the sections and being able to move back to the wall in this massive space, and obviously the shows you could have on the main floor, and then being able to repeat the same upstairs in what was then the academy. But that must have been, by that point, you're seen as a stalwart in British hairdressing, and for all intents and purposes this really successful brand. But that must have been a huge risk to take on a building like that at the time.
It was a huge but calculated risk. I think after, because you heard about Alan having to pay the wage from the money driving up and down to Harrods and stuff, and then with Peter Sellers, you know, we never ever wanted to be in that position again.
Yeah.
So it was you know, it was stretching us, but it wasn't.
Yeah.
We didn't think it was going to break us until...
Because that was kind of Black Monday, wasn't it? At that sort of period where kind of the Major's government had just absolutely plummeted the pound, and the interest rate went through the roof and everything. And for those that don't know, I mean, literally you were left with the two outside walls and a bit of the roof.
That's right.
That was left. I mean,
well, that was it. We never actually planned for that.
And how could you? You know,
because you know the bank had kept asking for different surveys, you know, before they lent us the money.
Yeah.
And every time you had a survey from somebody, they recommended that you got another type of structural survey, or, you know, so it was surveyed out its brain, and then it's still...
Somebody went, oh, by the way, you can't put all these people on that floor.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So.
Problem solved. Not so.
But no, we did come through that. But
yeah, and it definitely was. It was a marker for everybody that it then could be done. You know, the directors and stylists growing up in the brand, you know, were given so much more opportunity. Obviously, there was a chance to educate in there as well. And whether you wanted to be a teacher or not, obviously that then became the centre for the art team as well. So every Wednesday night we were kind of all in there and we're practising and doing our stuff. And then obviously there was just all this space to be able to practice. So it kind of then became the kind of almost the brand hub in my mind at the time, and training. And again, you know, recreating history, that's where you then got the drama teachers in to teach us, and we would do those classes, and it kind of that evolved constantly, whether it was the drama guys, whether it was the stage guys, whether, you know, you used to get the best waiters in the city in to teach us how to, you know, bring the coffees over, all that kind of stuff. The attention to detail was always huge. So in that period then also is just the beginning of kind of the business awards, the British Hairdressing Business Awards, and kind of really getting into that aspect of validating what you had set out to do way back, of going, I want to be recognised as not just this great hairdresser, but also, you know, one of the best business people in British hairdressing. And also at that stage again, you know, bring it up again, there wasn't that many women doing it in that position at the level that you were doing it at. Where was there?
Some, but no, as I say, most brands tend to be
I mean,
male-dominated.
Again, you're flicking through, you know, that's it, you're flicking through the magazine, and a lot of the places that had somebody's name above the door was usually, you know, some guy's name. So the fact that this kind of gave you this avenue with these awards to go, hey, hello there, by the way, I'm here and I'm doing it. So what drove you towards that initially? Was it just for recognition of the work that you had put in?
Yeah, I think so. I think because it was new, and you thought, oh, this is exciting, you know, because you can get the recognition for artistic skill, but nobody's actually given business any recognition. So I just thought, right, give it a go.
Give it a go. Well, it then goes back to everything you were talking about writing the plans for the training and keeping a note and keeping score of everything, because obviously to put these entries in.
But then it became really artistic and really competitive. Yeah. It's like everything, you know. I'm going to go a wee bit off piece here, Ricardo.
That's what we're here for.
Yeah. It was like when my son used to come home from school. And say, oh, Mum, we've got a project. And, of course, I'd be like, oh, project. And then, of course, I'm phoning my sister and my mum, and we're all... But then all the parents got involved. It's never the kids that do it.
No.
And, you know, all this creativity used to come out. So the business awards, I looked at it the same way. You know, it was like, it was a project. I'm like, right, okay. You know, we had the content, but it was more like, how can we make this be presented well?
Yeah, packaged, and how it was packaged.
And how it was packaged, and that was...
Yeah.
You know, so it's back to the flowers, isn't it? You could write some sort of script and put it in an A4 folder, but when it came down to it, it was like, oh no, let's really get into this, and how can we put our brand across, I suppose, and our message across.
And obviously it got to the stage I mean, we can't even, I don't even have them written down to list everything that not only had you achieved in that award sphere, what you ended up, I mean, obviously you're in for business directors and Hall of Fame, but pretty sure it was training and it was retail, and it was even to the point where they actually had to start changing the awards to let brands like ourselves re-enter, because there was nothing left to kind of go in for. And, you know, all those years later, we're still winning them because we've got the stylist of the year, and we've got the educator of the year who's going into the Hall of Fame next year as well. So that legacy has continued in the businesses that have grown, which is great. To the point where am I right about there was like a world hairdressing one as well, where you all get sent over to the States or something like that as well?
There was the Global Salon Business Awards, so
right.
we've won that 3 times, but it was only on 3 times.
All right, okay, so just win them all.
We won them all.
Is that the famous one where Tom Peters did the speech where it was like, oh, well, you won that last year, but so what? Is that kind of came out and went, very good, what about next year? Sounds a bit right. So you've got to that stage and you're sitting with, you know, these 3 salons. They're doing great. The academy's bubbling away. I think it got to the point where 24 was doing that good, and Alan had decided he wanted a change in the training, that the training actually gets sent back to the salons, because as a manager, I know that all of a sudden Alan's like, you know, by the way, you're not only you're managing the salon, but you're taking the training classes from now on as well. So obviously then you've got Adrian's story and the beginning of what would be then the franchise system. Again, grown out of circumstance that you've got a guy chapping the door and going, right, what's in it for me now? But how was that progression for you?
Well, it was part of like when we did this 10-year, 20-year plan, part of the bigger picture. You know, it was all like, we could have these satellite salons and we could have, you know, there wasn't just one plan. There was sort of different versions of that plan. And I think the thing with Adrian, it was like, well, we could open all these salons and have managers. And it was like speaking to other people like William McElroy, who, you know, he franchised his salons. And it clicked in place with us because it's like, well, we could have all of this salon, or it could be an opportunity for our people to own their own part of some. Yeah. You know, so maybe we don't get the whole cake. Yeah. But we got part of the cake. Uh-huh. So we just thought it was a better model for our group and our ethos for trying to grow people and give people a future. Yeah. Well, again, it's that, you know, right back to the start again, and that these avenues weren't given to you and it wasn't planned out for you. Whereas again, pretty much it was a kind of black and white thing. Well, if you do this, and again, once either yourself or Alan knew that that's where you wanted to be in the grand plan, you were then put down a direction and a training plan to sort of get to that stage, and obviously have, you know, markers to hit to make sure that, you know, you had the right kind of education behind you to be able to move forward and do it. Did you see it going to be as many as 10 then? Did you think, oh, there'd be a couple and it would all be very nice, or did you see it was going to go as much as that? We didn't really know then. You know, we just thought, let's try this. Yeah. But then when it did work, you could see it growing bigger. I mean, at the end of the day, we could be double the size, triple the size, if we hadn't tried to keep it in-house, you know. Yeah. But then you've got no control. As our friend in Ireland said, big isn't necessarily beautiful, you know. So I think that's why we've kept it to our own people, because it's something that I think all you guys feel part of the brand, you know. Yeah, oh no, definitely. It belongs to you as much as it belongs to us. Yeah. Whereas if you just put it out there and allowed anybody to... Again, for those watching and listening, you can't just turn up with a chunk of money and say, can I have an RRI salon? You've had to have grown up within the brand. You've got markers that you have to hit. You have to have walked the talk.
as a hairdresser, as a teacher, as a manager, you know, you had to have been in the art team, all these kind of facets. It wasn't just that you could show yourself in one part of it, and you basically had to walk the talk before you got that opportunity. But equally, it was open to everybody, because it wasn't about just turning up with the cash and being able to do it. But obviously, you know, you then had to save up a wee bit and have a bit of a nest egg for the inevitable time then when we all got to speak to our version of Peter Sellers at some point in our careers. But the thing that was always really sort of fascinating with that is obviously product range sort of evolved at the time of kind of 24 coming out, and it really growing at that point and kind of becoming sort of Rainbow Room International products after them being Alan Stewart products. So you were dealing with that. You were obviously dealing with a franchise brand, and that you had your business that was running your property, because obviously there was all that as well. And all the while there was trying to keep this standard all the time, which I then guess inevitably then grew into Howard Street, because there needed to be a big enough centre to deal with all of that. So obviously we touched on with Alan the fact that, you know, there was Howard Street, you know, 1.0, and the wee one next door that was too small the week it opened. You know, we're falling out of that by 2 weeks and then going into there. So your progression had obviously went through moving from 15 into George Square, which was just like mind-boggling. You know, for all that Buchanan Street was mind-boggling when it opened in the 70s, and, you know, when 24 opened in the 90s, you know, at the time that nothing looked like George Square when it opened, and right up to its refit was, you know, could still stand on its own 2 feet as one of the sort of most luxurious salons in the city, without a doubt. And then obviously the guys have taken it forward, and it's stunning again. I have serious floor envy when it comes to George Square, to be perfectly honest. And I laugh that you were talking about the bank manager and how much you've spent on the floor, because that's my 21st birthday present to myself, is a new floor in the salon, and I'm kind of gawping at how much it's going to cost me. But anyway, so all of that's happened, and then George Squares went out, and you've franchised that to the guys, and then you've moved into Howard Street. How was that transition, having been, you know, in charge of your 4 walls along with the brand, right? So the brand's doing its thing, but you're still Linda, the salon owner, in charge of your gang and your wee team, because internally we're all super competitive from the salons. You know, Buchanan Street wanted to win, and George Square wanted to win, or, you know, Clarkson wanted to win, or whatever. You know, it's a dysfunctional, non-related family business, as I always describe it, and we were always super competitive within it. So to give up not being in a salon, was that a bit of a kind of turning point?
Yes, I mean, it was difficult. You know, I just loved being in the salon, and I loved George Square. But it was the right thing to do, you know, because Yaz and Dylan were right. They wanted a salon. They were looking at different areas, and it was just the right fit.
Mm-hmm. So then coming out of there and then going down, because in amongst all of this, you hadn't given up actually cutting hair. I mean, Alan had stopped in 99 to go and work on the computer system and then come back, which, needless to say, he left that in my boat to tell these clients of 40 and 50 years heritage with them that he wasn't coming back to cut their hair.
But I used to get accosted in supermarkets by them and stuff.
When's he coming back? You're like that, oh, maybe soon. Like, he's not coming back. But well, in saying that, he didn't know himself, did he, really? No. He was kind of, he hadn't decided, and then it obviously just went on long enough that he thought, well, I'll not bother my shirt. But you then kept still doing clients and kept your hand to this day and doing that, but then obviously your kind of role, not that it changed, it just got way bigger and more complicated down at the academy. But I take it you jumped into that as in the same way, 2-footed and head first, as you did with all the other challenges leading up to that point.
Yeah, I suppose I was still doing the same role, but just in a different building.
Yeah,
almost.
Yeah. But do you feel that now that it's kind of...
Oh, it has grown arms and legs, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, it's anybody that, you know, so when I now employ somebody or give somebody a job, or they join the company and the first thing's to come and get the photograph taken so that it goes on to the online booking. You know, when they arrive at Howard Street, it's like, all right, okay, so they thought the salon was impressive, and then they come to the academy, and it kind of blows their mind a wee bit that they know the enormity of and the responsibility of what they're joining. And do you feel that comes from the academy outwards as well?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, when we moved from, as you say, academy point 1 to point 2, I mean, Alan said, oh, we could take the building next door, and I was like, what? I mean, I went, oh my goodness. I'm like, it's too big. What are we going to do with it?
I mean, what is it, 5 times bigger than what the initial one? I mean, it's
that's 7,500 square feet, right. So maybe 6 times bigger. Balance, like, it was a bit like that film. What was it? Build It and They'll Come.
Field of Dreams. Yeah.
But it is. I mean, it's such a fantastic space, you know, and it just allows you, you know, to do everything. Yeah. And to be able to offer everything in that one space.
Because the great thing as well, it's been utilised out with our brand too, and whether that's been organisations that use it, brands that use it, you know, is a really great thing as well. It's kind of nice for us because we get a wee sneaky peek of what everybody's doing because we're there. And then obviously as directors, it's just a constant hub for us to come back to once a month and get round that table and hopefully make sure that the message coming out from you guys is still coming through us and through onto our guys as well. So that's never been lost on us.
I mean, it's the linchpin of the business. You know, it's the education hub. And it's you see, it's not just for hairdressing education, it's all education.
Yeah.
You know?
And I think the thing with that as well is it's just a constant running theme between your story and Alan's story all the time. It was never about either keeping information to yourself or keeping technique to yourself or just keeping the brand to yourself and it was my ball and you're not getting to play it. It was always finding avenues to give out the way, and obviously with the size of that business and that academy, you've just got this unique space to be able to do it, which is, you know, we're thankful for it, never mind anything else. So at that point, kind of, right, okay, well, to be honest, I was just coming up to the kind of the end. I'm going to do a kind of future of the brand, future of the industry, and then that'll be kind of, oh shit. So that kind of takes us to, oh, sorry.
No, you
okay. So that kind of takes us to a really obvious juncture in it that where do you see the brand going forward from now? Because it's in this sort of really sort of stable state of these businesses having been around, you know, the franchises, you know, even the, in the inverted commas, newer ones are, you know, decades old now and have been doing really, really well. The academy's as strong as it's ever been, be that with the amount of people attending it, and the awards that it's winning right up till last week, you know, at the fellowship. So that's all in place. How do you see it sort of progressing from now?
Hopefully, I mean, we will still grow people into because we've got the whole structure there, we've got the academy there. I would like to see it flourish and carry on, and hopefully we can grow a third generation or fourth generation.
Yeah, because that's the thing. I mean, obviously for myself, Alan always, you know, when I was an assistant, we were in the academy. My first ever assistant show was Alan talking about being 100-year brand, you know, and I joked and I laughed at the time. And I'm going, God, I'm not even going to see it as a 100-year brand, but I'm sitting employing people at 16 years old just now that hopefully could be the people to take it onto that, and it's about having that structure in place, hopefully for them to take it. And you know, at the time of recording, there's a lot of kind of negative chat online and in the press about small business in general, and where the country's at and where hairdressing falls within that. Do you feel it's as doomsday as they're saying, or do you still see it as being as great an industry to be involved in?
It's difficult at the moment, you
Yeah.
know. I don't think the budget's particularly helped, but there's always been difficulties, and I think it's just, you know, you just have to find solutions
Yeah.
to it. And if you can thrive in hard times, then you'll fly in the good times.
Well, I think that's a perfect way to end. That is for sure. It's been fascinating for me because lots of it I know, but there's just some bits on there that are amazing to find out. And importantly, whether people are part of the brand just now or are going to be in the future, it's absolute dynamite for them to know this. So thanks very much, Linda.
My pleasure, Ricardo.
Thank you.